Number 10. Whitney Bulger. Whitney Bulger was a notorious gangster from the Boston area who turned into an FBI informant and helped the federal authorities to take down several members of his rival crime families. However, after he got tipped off about the FBI turning on him, he spent 16 long years running from the feds. For 12 of those years, he was on the most wanted list of the FBI, underneath Osama bin Laden. Whitney was finally captured in the year 2011 and given 2 consecutive life sentences. Not only was he charged with things like racketeering and extortion, he was also charged for his involvement in 11 murders. Since 2011, he's spent his time incarcerated in the state of Florida, pretty much free from any ugly incidents. However, after he was transferred to West Virginia, he wound up dead the day after his arrival. His death was a pretty brutal one too. 4 inmates were somehow able to walk into his cell at about 6 o'clock in the morning and beat him with a sock loaded full of metal locks. He then had his eyes gouged out of his skull and the murderers even tried to cut out his tongue. This is pretty classic snitch murder stuff, as eyes and tongues were almost always removed back in the 30s and 40s when a hit was taken out on a snitch. Even though Whitney was a hardened criminal, he had snitched on way too many people, and those people had not forgotten. Snitches don't just get stitches. Most snitches, especially in gang-related situations, end up dead. Number 9. Snitch with no reward. Frederick Cobia learned the hard way that being a snitch doesn't always pay off. In a Palm Beach County courtroom, veteran detectives and prosecutors stood up and vouched for a known murderer at his sentencing trial. They were trying to tell the judge that Frederick was a trusted ally of the police and that he'd actually helped them out a lot to put away many dangerous criminals by tattletaling. This guy was actually one of their favorite snitches and was a key witness in roughly 24 cases over the past 10 years. But here's the deal. Frederick was also a heartless murderer who beat a man with the butt of his pistol and shot him to death in a 2009 home invasion. The attorney for Frederick wanted his sentence to be only 10 years on account of him helping the police. However, the judge didn't really care what he'd done for the police, seeing as he'd broken into a person's home and shot him to death in cold blood, and then proceeded to rob them. So yeah, he gave Frederick 40 years for murder, snitch or no snitch. Number 8. Rene Enriquez. Rene Boxer Enriquez was born in California in 1962. He was a gang member and an influential person in the Mexican mafia before he turned into a rat, aka federal witness, back in 2003. He left the mafia and provided American authorities with intelligence on the very criminals he had worked closely with for years. He even showed up to be an expert witness in dozens of criminal trials. He was hoping to get out of prison once he helped the feds to lock up a large portion of the Mexican mafia. However, in 2015, his release was blocked because of him being a snitch. The judge said that wherever he went, he would be a danger to the people around him because the Mexican mafia wanted him dead, and the judge was right. He was on their hit list for cooperating with the cops. Also, he happened to be a registered sex offender. If he was put into witness protection, he wouldn't appear as a registered offender, and this was not okay with the ruling authorities. And it's not okay with us either. So he became a snitch for nothing. Rene was denied parole again in 2017 and again in 2019. In fact, he's still rotting in prison and will probably never be let out, even though he snitched on one of the most dangerous mafias in America and put multiple criminals behind bars. Number 7. Cash for snitches. In China, apparently it pays to be a snitch. In a totally bizarre move, China has begun targeting people who owe money to the government and other businesses by posting advertisements on the popular application WeChat, where they offer cash money to people who rat out their friends and family. How this works is that if you know a person who owes the Chinese government money and you see the advertisement on your phone, if you tell the government who they are and what kind of money they owe, you yourself will get paid. They're actually trying to create a society in which people earn money for snitching on other people when they do something the government doesn't like. I guess that's one way to make the world a better place. Or one way to fill the government's pockets. It just depends on how you look at it. But here's where things get even crazier. These same advertisements are being used to try and catch social dissidents. Rewards of up to $1 million are being advertised on the application for bad people who the government are often after for crimes like mobilizing social forces, whistleblowing, and not paying back debts. The ads come complete with pictures of the individuals, as well as full information on who they are and what kind of crime they've committed. What do you think about a name and shame system like this? Do you think it's a good idea or a bad one? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below. And if you're liking this video, Be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. Facebook Mole. We've heard of Facebook being used to catch idiot people committing stupid crimes and helping solve cases. But this is something else entirely. A mother of 7 in Illinois has been accused of encouraging her Facebook followers to kill a gang member who turned into a mole for the FBI in a case of stolen weapons. The mother is named Leisha Stansell, and she got busted after being caught with a new AR-15 assault rifle that was stolen from a freight train in September of 2016. A man named Brian Stafford was also arrested, but then he turned into a mole and started ratting out other people, allegedly. Leisha, angry about her own arrest, went on Facebook and posted pictures of Brian and encouraged anyone who saw him to shoot him in the head. Naturally, the police were not super happy about this. She now faces charges of cyber-stalking along with the gun charges. When asked to be released pending her trial, the judge said no based on the Facebook post, saying she was too dangerous to be out on the streets. So yeah, not so surprising that Facebook and the law look down on heinous posts like that. Number 5. Snitches get stitches. A teenager in Grand Rapids has gotten in trouble for trying to kill another teenager and then burn his body in a mine dump because he thought he was going to snitch to the police about a fight. Yeah, it's probably a good thing this kid was caught with a crime like this early on in his life, because now police have the most likely future serial killer in their sights. This deranged teenager even enlisted the help of one of his deranged friends, who he later revealed he was planning to also kill if he became suspicious that his friend was going to snitch. In this case, nobody actually snitched, yet Tobias Lanham, just 18 years old, was charged with first and second degree abetting attempted murder. Tobias stabbed John Bonet 8 times in the chest, leg, spine, and abdomen, and then tried to slice his throat open. This was after luring Bonet to the mine dump with his friend, saying that they were all going to go there to party. After they got out of the car, Tobias called John a snitch and then pulled out a knife and started stabbing. The only reason the young kid survived was because another vehicle pulled up and Tobias and his friend ran away. And in the end, it was all over a stupid teenage fight that had broken out the week before, with Tobias trying to preemptively stop John from snitching. Number 4. Tekashi 6ix9ine. 23-year-old Daniel Hernandez, also known as Tekashi 6ix9ine, became extremely famous back in 2017 with his breakout rap hit Gunmo. The young rapper has long, colorful hair and tattoos all over his face and body. Have you seen him online before? Or have you heard any of his music? Well, he continued being famous thanks to trolling social media, but this kid's rap career has come to a grinding halt. It actually came to a halt last November when Daniel was arrested for racketeering and possession of weapons. It all has to do with his involvement in the 9 Trey Gangsta Bloods gang. Vulture reported his arrest was part of a joint investigation by the NYPD, the Justice Department's Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and the Department of Homeland Security. The arrest was rushed due to investigators' worries that Hernandez's former associates were planning to attack him. But after the arrest, Daniel decided he was gonna snitch on the members of his own gang. He implicated the gang members in a string of violent acts, like assaults and kidnappings, and even ousted his former manager as a high-ranking member of the criminal group. But it didn't stop there. He went on snitching and snitching, even alleging that Cardi B was a member of another Bloods gang. But for all his snitching, he's still finished. He now faces the possibility of life in prison, though his sentence could be reduced because of all the snitching. The problem for the rapper is that he'll never make another dollar now that the world knows he's got a big fat mouth and will tell on everyone when he gets in hot water. Number 3. Informant misconduct. A former Redmont police detective has gotten himself in some serious trouble after sending inappropriate texts to an undercover informant. He's been sentenced to spend 5 days in jail and 18 months on probation, with special accommodations to be given because of his status as a former police officer. His name is Corey Buckley, and he was once given the Medal of Valor in 2016 for saving the life of another police officer by killing an armed gunman in downtown Redmond. The encounter came with some complications, though. It led to a number of issues for Buckley, including undiagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder and alcohol abuse. But his time in the limelight is now over. While Buckley was working with the Central Oregon Drug Enforcement Team, he met a woman who became an informant by giving him the time and location of an upcoming drug bust. At the time, the woman had an open criminal case against her and was facing a possible prison sentence for her own involvement in the illegal drug trade. In exchange for the information, he gave her a $20 gift card. But here's where things get weird. Several weeks after she helped with the bust, Buckley began sending her inappropriate text messages. He then arranged to meet her outside of a local mall where he touched her inappropriately inside of his patrol car. The woman was so disturbed by his actions that she snitched on him to his police lieutenant. His career is now over and he's been publicly shamed. Number 2. Snitches get dismembered. A police informant was slain after a police officer she'd been working with exposed her as an informant. This was a gross act of misconduct on behalf of the police in Detroit, and Oakland County has finally agreed to pay $1 million in a settlement with the dead woman's family. Here's how it started. Shelley Hillard got busted with marijuana at a motel in 2011 at the age of 19. She agreed to give up her supplier so she wouldn't have to face any charges and her record would stay clean. Police were then able to arrest the drug dealer a few hours later. Just a couple of days later, Shelley wound up dismembered and dead. A police officer had given the details of Shelley to the drug dealer, revealing her as the informant. In revenge, the criminal gang that her drug dealer was associated with tracked her down, chopped up her body into pieces, and then set her on fire. The murderer, Kasim Rakib, has been sentenced to 25 years in prison for her murder. Number 1. The Drunk Russian. In November of 2015, a police officer in St. Petersburg, Russia, met with an informant. The officer's name was Andrei Artemyev. When he met the informant, he had already been drinking pretty heavily that night. For whatever reason, the two began exchanging heated words. Andrei pulled his gun from its holster and started waving it around like a lunatic. During all the waving, his finger hit the trigger, and he shot and killed the informant. It was a drunken accident, but Andrei got charged anyway with abusing authority and misusing his firearm. Prosecutors wanted to give the cop 12 years in prison for murder, but the judge wasn't having any of that. Instead, the officer got charged with criminal negligence and only spent 9 months behind bars. Do you think that's fair?
10. Saved by a bear. A man in Northern California got attacked by a mountain lion, but his life was saved by an unexpected hero. Robert Biggs was out on a hike near Whiskey Flats when he stumbled upon a mama bear with her cubs. This is the last thing you want to see while on a hike, as mother bears are extremely protective of their young and won't hesitate to destroy a measly human. Luckily, Robert was far enough away that he could admire the bear and her babies from a distance and then move along. But when he looked away from the bears and started to leave, he suddenly realized that he had an admirer too. A mountain lion had been stalking him. The enormous cat jumped onto his back and knocked him over. Robert managed to raise his backpack over his head to protect his skull, but it seemed like a hopeless situation. The lion was hungry and seemed determined to eat Robert's brains. This is when the mother bear intervened. From out of nowhere, the bear ran into the situation and saved Robert's life. The mama bear literally grabbed the cat by its neck and threw it to the ground. The two gnarly animals fought for a few seconds before the lion realized it was beat and ran off into the woods. Robert believes the lion was stalking the bear's babies, and that's why it attacked. And that's also why the bear took it upon herself to get rid of the pesky feline. If it weren't for her, Robert could have been a goner. 9. Humpback Savior. Marine biologist Nan Hauser claims she was saved from being eaten by a giant tiger shark in the South Pacific by an unlikely ally. Hauser didn't understand what was going on at the time. You see, there was a giant humpback whale that weighed 25 tons. Pushing and bullying her through the water. Not wanting to upset the enormous animal, Hauser tried to remain calm and not make any sudden movements. Still, the whale was pushing her with its big mouth, tucking her underneath its fins, and trying to keep the woman real close. It wasn't until after the whale calmed down that the crew that had been filming Hauser's interactions with the mammal mentioned the giant tiger shark. It had been lurking near the woman and the whale had clearly been trying to keep the woman safe. This isn't the first time a whale has been witnessed saving someone. Whales are also known to hide seals from predators by doing the same thing, tucking them under their fins and keeping them from the mouths of sharks. Ah, that's so sweet. 8. Dog Rescue. Sadie is a 100-pound, 45-kilogram German Shepherd who had been turned away from 3 shelters before finally arriving at the Ramapo-Bergen Animal Refuge in New Jersey back in 2020. She had an issue with human men and was anxious and uneasy around them. The animal refuge she wound up at in New Jersey is a special place reserved for the most unwanted of dogs. They specialize in finding proper homes for dogs who just don't take that well to people. They were hoping to find a female that Sadie could go with, but a man named Brian ended up visiting the shelter and bonding with Sadie immediately. Brian took Sadie home in October and they spent 3 months bonding and training, becoming close friends during the miserable isolation of the pandemic. But after Brian saved Sadie's life by rescuing her from the shelter, she returned the favor. It happened on January 18th when Brian woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom and his legs gave out beneath him. It's important to mention that Brian had only recently recovered from being infected with COVID-19. Once he collapsed, he was stuck between his bed and the wall and unable to reach his cell phone. That was when Sadie came to the rescue. Brian was able to grab hold of her collar, and the heavy dog then towed him across the room to where he was able to grab his phone and call for help. After the horrifying incident in Brian's home, he had to spend 3 weeks away from his loyal companion in a rehab facility. The two were reunited after, and so far as we know, they are still living happily together. Do you know of any other brave dogs that should be in a video like this? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 7. Lion Guardians. A girl in Ethiopia was abducted and beaten by evil men who were trying to force her into an unwanted marriage. She was only 12 years old when she went missing, according to the report from NBC News. Local authorities were aware that she had been stolen by 7 men but couldn't figure out where they had taken her. It wasn't until many days after the girl was gone that authorities discovered her badly beaten about 350 miles, 563 kilometers from the capital city of Addis Ababa. They found her under the guardianship of a pride of lions, who they say had been guarding the girl for nearly a whole day. It's not exactly clear what happened to the abductors, but Stuart Williams, a wildlife expert familiar with the incident, says the child may have been saved because she was crying after the men beat her up. The lions mistook her crying for the sound of a lion cub meowing and went to protect her. They were probably a little confused when they found a human instead of a baby lion, but they stood by and guarded her anyway. The authorities say the lions may well have saved her life. If the men had come back and the lions hadn't been there protecting her, they could have beaten her all the way to death. The incident has since been labeled a miracle, especially since lions usually eat people instead of saving them. 6. Ning Nong. Ning Nong was the most heroic elephant in all of Thailand. Back in 2004, when one of the most terrible tsunamis in modern times struck Thailand on Boxing Day and killed thousands of people, one little girl was saved thanks to her bond with Ning Nong the elephant. Amber Owen was staying in Phuket with her family when the natural disaster hit. As the tsunami came crashing towards the shore, Amber was riding on the back of Ning Nong. Thanks to the elephant's natural protective instincts, and likely because the girl had been spending so much time with the elephant, it protected her from the incoming wave. Here's exactly how it happened. Amber was on the elephant's back when the first wave hit. People were swept up in the wave, but Amber was okay on the animal's back. Then the wave receded, and people ran out to the beach to collect the fish that had gotten stuck on shore. The elephant trainer was trying to get Ning Nong to calm down, but the elephant kept forcing its way inland, basically running as fast as it could from the beach with Amber on its back. The elephant knew instinctively that a larger wave was coming. Minutes later, when the real wave crashed ashore, Ning Nong had made it far enough inland and was a strong enough beast that it braced against the wave. The other people floated by like watery corpses, but Amber was safe. In the end, Ning Nong helped Amber get to safety by leaning against a building so that she could climb on top of it and get out of the reach of the water. Unfortunately, nobody knows what happened to the brave elephant after that. It probably got swept away in the tsunami after saving Amber's life. 5. Dr. Shark. A man recently had his life saved after almost being killed by a shark. Eugene Finney was on vacation with his family at Huntington Beach in California when he went for a swim and met the apex predator. According to what the 39-year-old told local news, he felt something immense slam into his back, hitting him harder than he had ever been hit before. The shark attack was so sudden and so quick that Eugene couldn't tell how badly he was hurt. He luckily managed to escape the marine predator and scramble back to the shore. Once there, his family was shocked to see he had deep lacerations across his back, as if he'd been attacked by a butcher. You're probably wondering by now just how exactly the shark attack saved Eugene's life. This happened later when he returned to work in Massachusetts and was struggling with back pain that he assumed was from the shark attack. When he visited the hospital, doctors told him that he had a stage 1 tumor in his kidney the size of a walnut. In other words, he had cancer, and would have never have known it if not for getting almost killed by an angry shark. Doctors were able to remove the growth and save Eugene's life before the tumor had a chance to grow into something deadly. This is definitely a different kind of story of a wild animal saving someone, but still. 4. Kangaroo to the rescue. A young boy in Australia has credited a kangaroo with saving his life after he got lost in the forest in the middle of winter. Simon Kruger, only 7 years old, went missing in the Deep Creek Conservation Park near Adelaide. It happened after he strolled away from a family picnic at around 1 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. Over 40 people formed a search party to find the young boy, including a pair of rescue helicopters. But they were unable to track him down and the weather was getting cold. Still, the search party pushed on through the night before one of the helicopters eventually spotted him no more than 1,500 feet, 457 meters from where he had originally gone missing. After being rescued, the boy claimed that he had slept under a tree with a kangaroo. During the family picnic, Simon saw the kangaroo and followed him into the woods. After Simon got lost and the sun started going down, Simon curled into the nook of a tree out of fear. The kangaroo from earlier returned and slept next to him, keeping the little boy warm and alive through the cold night. 3. Goat firefighter. A goat named Speedy saved a family in Arkansas from being burned alive in a horrifying fire. Abigail Bruce was sleeping in the living room on a Saturday night when she was woken up by her pet goat. The goat was acting exceptionally strange, jumping on the girl's legs and hitting her in the chest. When she finally woke up, she realized that the entire house was on fire. There was smoke clouding her vision, and the whole place seemed to be ready to collapse. Abigail managed to get off the couch and make it to the room where her parents were sleeping. She woke them up just in the nick of time because the fire was already creeping across the floor. They had no choice but to break open the bedroom window and scramble onto the front lawn. The fire department showed up a few minutes later and put out the flames, but their house was beyond saving. If it hadn't been for Speedy the goat waking Abigail up, the whole family likely would have burned up with their belongings in the house. To make the story even more miraculous, Abigail's father didn't even want the goat in the first place. They brought the goat home just 2 days before the fire as an early birthday gift to Abigail. The goat ended up being more of a gift than anyone had intended. 2. Kitten rescue. Glenn Shulman adopted a black kitten from the Humane Society in North Texas back in January. He knew the kitten was special from the moment he set his eyes on it. Glenn himself has a medical condition in which he suffers seizures. He's had it ever since he was just a boy, with his seizures so bad sometimes that they stop him from breathing in the middle of the night. Not long after adopting the kitten, whom he named Blake, Glenn suffered one of his deadliest seizures ever. The seizure took him while he was asleep and he stopped breathing. Amazingly, his new kitten came to the rescue and bit him extremely hard on the toe, jarring him back into consciousness. If not for that sharp bite, Glenn may very well never have woken up. And before you chalk it up to an accident, it definitely wasn't. Glenn said the bite was much too hard to be anything playful, as if the kitten had done it purely to wake Glenn up and save his life. 1. Army of Crows. A woman in Oregon accidentally created an army of crows that went on to be her personal protectors. It all started when she saw a nature documentary about how crows can be befriended by giving them food. So the woman thought she would make some crows friends. She ended up with an army of about 15 crows just by feeding them every day. The crows would follow her whenever she left the house. They also began to guard her from her neighbors. When the neighbor got a little too close one day to have a chat, the crows attacked, scaring the woman's neighbor back inside. While the crows haven't directly saved the woman's life just yet, they still hang around her house and keep their watchful eyes open for any funny business. The woman inadvertently created her own home security system of living crows, which some say is better than any electronic surveillance system. If someone ever tries to break in or attack her, the crows will make quick work of the intruder. 10. Crystal Lake Hammer Attack. When two women went for a relaxing stroll around Crystal Lake, the last thing they expected was to meet Angel R. Cardoza, the 50-year-old man who attacked them with a hammer. This terrifying incident occurred just after 5 o'clock at night in September of 2019. According to the prosecutors on the case, Angel Cardoza was riding his bike down the trail when he spotted a woman walking alone. For whatever crazy reason, he took out a hammer and started beating her in the head with it. Another woman came upon the grisly scene, yelled at the psycho to stop, threatened to call 911, and then she too was bludgeoned with the hammer. Cardoza stopped beating the first woman and ran after the bystander, striking her once in the arm before he turned and fled. Luckily, the two women were able to quickly get some help. They were transported to the Northwestern Medicine McHenry Hospital and treated for non-life-threatening injuries. As for Mr. Cardoza, he was captured 3 days later by the police and later pled guilty to one count of attempted murder and another count of aggravated battery. He was then sentenced to spend 30 years in prison. The real question here is, why did Cardoza attack these women? Unfortunately, we don't know the answer. As of right now, it looks like a random lake attack with absolutely no reasonable motive. 9. Disney Alligator. The happiest place on Earth turned into the most tragic place on Earth when the Florida authorities had to recover the body of a young boy who was dragged into a lake by an alligator while on vacation with his family. This terrifying thing happened to a toddler from Nebraska while playing in the water near Disney's Grand Floridian Resort and Spa. It was just after 9 o'clock at night, an ordinary Tuesday, and everything was quiet. Then, from out of nowhere, the vicious alligator emerged from the lake, snatched the young boy in its powerful jaws, and pulled him underwater. Suffice to say, the toddler's parents were in shock. It happened so fast that there was nothing they could do. The father charged in after him, but the alligator was too wily. It vanished into the water and was not seen again. The boy wasn't seen again either, at least not until the next day in the middle of the afternoon. Orange County Sheriff Jerry Demings helped recover the boy's corpse and had the unfortunate task of telling his parents that the little boy won't be enjoying the rest of his Disney vacation. An autopsy found that he was drowned by the alligator. The murderous beast has since been tracked down and euthanized. 8. Choking at Lady Lake. Marlene Blow was discovered face down and dead, floating in Lake Quigsigamon on July 28th. At first, investigators thought the poor woman had drowned, but they quickly learned that was not the case. When they did an autopsy on the 38-year-old woman, they found that her neck had been fractured and that she suffered injuries suggestive of a violent struggle. The drowning turned into a murder. The investigation revealed that Marlene had been spending a lot of time in the park where her body was found. However, nobody really knew what she was doing there. It later came out that Marlene was last seen with a man named Joseph Derryrimple at about 2 o'clock in the morning the day she was killed. When the police tried to apprehend Joseph, he denied ever meeting Marlene. His story quickly changed, though, and he admitted that the two had been meeting and that they had been getting frisky in the park at night. Apparently, Marlene was living a dangerous life that her family didn't know about, having midnight outings at the lake with strange men. But she picked the wrong man that night, as Joseph already had a long history of domestic violence. He even got busted in 2010 for shoving his girlfriend onto the floor. Nobody knows exactly what went wrong during their encounter, but whatever it was, Marlene ended up literally sleeping with the fishes. 7. The Lava Lake Murders. An outing in Bend, Oregon that took place decades ago still haunts the locals who live around Lava Lake. It was the fall of 1923, and a trio of friends were heading out to the lake to hunt marten and fox. They were due to be back after the winter was over, but they never returned to their homes. Their families and friends became worried and sent a search party to look for the three men. They were discovered underneath the frozen ice of Lava Lake, murdered. To this day, the terrible crime has never been solved. Here's what investigators were able to piece together in the 1920s. The men were staying in a cabin in the woods right beside Lava Lake. They made moonshine and hunted for furs throughout the fall and winter. Around Christmas, they went back to Bend to sell a load of furs, then returned to the cabin. They were supposed to be home for good in February, but by April they still hadn't gone back. The cabin was later found abandoned, with dishes still on the table from an abruptly abandoned breakfast. They left behind their rifles and traps and winter clothing. There was also a hammer found in the storage shed stained with blood. Then the bodies were discovered. All three men had been shot and beaten with a hammer, then wrapped in canvas and dropped into the lake. To this day, nobody has any idea who the killer is or why he targeted the three men, seemingly minding their own business at the cabin on the lake. Who do you think murdered these men and why? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 6. Rocky Return. While trying to return home, a man ended up on the wrong side of the water at Lake Jacozzi near the Devil's Fork State Park in South Carolina. According to the Oconee County Coroner's Office, the unfortunate man drowned at about 4:50 p.m. on Tuesday. He was about to leave the lake after a relaxing fishing trip. He's been identified as 85-year-old Wallace Edward Curtis, and his body was found just 20 yards, 18 meters from the boat ramp. He almost made it home when the freak accident occurred. Curtis left home very early in the morning that Tuesday. His family members became increasingly concerned as the hours went by and he never returned. They called him, but he didn't answer. They started to panic. It was a man walking by Curtis's vehicle that ended up solving the mystery, as he heard Curtis's phone ringing and answered it. Curtis's vehicle was still parked on the boat ramp, back down to the water and the engine still running. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what had happened. The 85-year-old man had been trying to get his boat onto the trailer attached to his truck when something went horribly wrong. Curtis likely tripped, hit his head, and ended up floating dead in the water, leaving his boat just a few yards from the landing. 5. Speedboat Nightmare. In Colombia, disaster struck when a speedboat crashed straight into an inflatable raft. This was in the coastal city of Cartagena, and although it was pretty bad, it could have been a lot worse. The victims here were brothers, just some dudes enjoying their day off at the local beach. They were hitched to the back of a boat in their very own inflatable tube. Not a care in the world. Then from out of nowhere, a speedboat plowed into them head first, as if the driver had actually been trying to hit them. The inflatable tube obviously lost the fight with the speedboat, and the brothers were sent spiraling into the water. One of them got hit so hard by the speedboat that his jaw was fractured and his teeth burst out of his head. According to one of the victims, Julian Casabuenos, the speedboat was being operated by a teenager. The kid driving the speedboat didn't even stick around to see what happened, and instead took off and was never seen again. And seeing as this is Colombia, Julian complained that the police didn't care, the Port Authority didn't do anything, and this time, no justice will be served for the devastating hit and run. 4. Snakebite at Moss Lake. At Lake Moss, a teenage boy was sent to the hospital after being bitten by an extremely dangerous snake. According to Cook County Sheriff Mike Compton, the young boy had just jumped off a dock and was swimming around in the designated swimming area with some friends when a water moccasin came out of nowhere, sunk its fangs into his arm, and then swam away like nothing happened. The incident occurred at about 6:15 p.m., but the emergency call wasn't made until 6:40. Even though the kid got out of the lake okay, he wasn't sure if any venom had been injected into him. When emergency responders arrived, they had him airlifted to a hospital anyway. A water moccasin has such powerful venom that it's been known to kill a fully grown person, so a child would definitely not fare too well. It was better to be safe than sorry. And luckily the snake hadn't actually delivered any venom into the child's body. It only bit him, which is extremely fortunate for the young boy. This is especially true since according to the University of Maryland Medical Center, at least 8,000 people in the United States are bitten by venomous snakes each year. The wound still hurt quite a bit and the boy needed to be treated for an infection. But he got away without being poisoned by the evil serpent. 3. Last goodbye. A casual boating trip turned into tragedy at the Lake Forest Yacht Club when Richard Dove crashed his boat. Nobody is sure what exactly happened, but eyewitnesses said he hit something hard, causing the boat to crash and for Richard to go overboard. At the time of the accident, Richard was with his black lab named Whiskey, his best friend who he never went anywhere without. The dog survived the accident, but Richard was taken to the hospital and put on life support. Unfortunately, Richard didn't make it. The poor dog was looked after by one of the witnesses who saw the accident. His name is Don Boyd, and he said he could tell just how loyal Richard's dog was by the way the animal paced and cried all night without its owner. But here's where things get really sad. When Richard was taken off life support, the nurses allowed his dog to pay one final visit. The last moments of Richard's life, although he was comatose and didn't know it, were spent with his beloved dog. And after Richard was gone, the dog was handed over to some family members. 2. Drowned activist. Malik Alim has been described as an incredible human. He was an activist from Chicago who gained serious notoriety for leading the movement to end cash bonds in Illinois. But unfortunately for Malik, all his good deeds couldn't save him from a tragic tubing accident while out with his family in Fox Lake. What should have been a wonderful time with Malik and his 2 children turned into a nightmare. Malik was with his kids in a tube being pulled by a boat. They were having fun, bouncing off the waves, until one extremely large wave sent all 3 of them into the lake. The children managed to grab back onto the inflatable tube, but Malik never resurfaced from under the water. He had no life jacket on and apparently couldn't swim very well. When he hit the surface of the lake, he sank like a stone and never came back up. His body wasn't discovered until the next day. 1. Drunk boating. A dramatic boat crash at Smithville Lake in Minnesota was caused by a man known to be a degenerate and a bit of a drunk. The guy's name is Michael Britton, and he was behind the wheel of a boat when he crashed into a smaller boat and injured all 10 people aboard the smaller vessel. Everyone on board had to be driven away in ambulances. After the accident, investigators uncovered a long history of similar driving accidents with Michael. He had been convicted of several traffic violations, of domestic battery, of burglary, and of driving under the influence. In fact, he already had 5 DUI arrests from between 2004 and 2020. Not only did he drive boats drunk, he also drove cars drunk. But in reality, things could have been a lot worse. The mother of one of the survivors told local news how lucky her daughter was that she saw the boat barreling towards her as she was able to jump out of the way and into the water. But the others on board were not so lucky, such as the 2-year-old who was injured and in dire condition when sent to the hospital. As for Michael, he wasn't even charged with a criminal offense. Instead, he was only cited for careless driving. What's the worst thing you've seen happen at a lake? Let us know in the comments, and thanks for watching. If you haven't already, remember to subscribe and come back soon to check out more great content. See you next time. Bye.